Good morning, Metalheads here, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we're looking at the latest album from Infant Annihilator, entitled The Battle of Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth. I don't fucking know, nor do I care. There are frankly far more important things regarding this album and this band that we need to discuss. Therefore, we are moving the fuck on. And may I just say right off the bat, it is a stupid but admittedly somewhat bold decision for any band to release an album on 9/11 of all fucking days. Particularly when you're a death metal band named Infant Annihilator, and especially particularly when Slayer infamously accidentally released God Hates Us All on September 11th, 2001. Very bold move, Infant Annihilator. Mind you, also stupid, shocking, and I'm sure, according to some people, blatantly offensive, but bold nonetheless. And quite fitting to a certain extent, because all of those terms describe Infant Annihilator pretty well. They are abhorrently violent and gruesome, objectively somewhat offensive. They've had song titles in the past such as Motherless Miscarriage and Pedophilic Ultimatum and Pelt of Innocent Flesh. That middle track in particular, let's all agree on this right here. That's an eyebrow raiser. Like, if I knew nothing about death metal and came across this, I would have serious concerns. But the band have avoided major controversy, mostly because, well, they are a death metal band. They're not exactly on people's radar the way that Metallica or Slipknot would be. And B, because the death metal masses have been willing to overlook this because, for the most part, they offer some pretty good jams, some pretty hectic, crazy, well-performed death grind with a lot of technical nuances and influences. Not the most original or progressive stuff, but well-performed and in the right environment, legitimately kind of fun. However, now we're at album number 3 in the band's career, and as the band has refused to evolve, I, as a person, have evolved, and there are things that I don't really tolerate in my music anymore. For instance, Nazis. I don't tolerate Nazis in my music. Therefore, I don't tolerate Vargvakurns. I don't tolerate National Socialist black metal. And I don't tolerate people throwing baseless accusations and coming to the defense of these bands simply because they write cool songs, bro. Whatever, who cares if they're Nazis? I just want to listen to some cool music. Another thing I don't care for is shock factor, okay? Things that I found shocking years ago when I was discovering extreme music, I don't find shocking anymore. And then there's just the fact that bands pushing themselves to be shocking for the sake of being shocking rather than having something to say is just edgy. It's obnoxious, and it paves the way for songs like Cough Cough Pedophilic Ultimatum, which raises some fucking eyebrows and it makes all of us look like assholes. And that's where we are on album number 3. Infant Annihilator are once again serving up a delicious batch of death metal. Don't get me wrong, on that end they do perfectly fine. But their attempt to continuously be ultra shocking and provocative is just annoying at this point. And while it doesn't hinder the record per se, it does prevent me from wanting to explore more of this band in the future. Particularly when, let's be honest, they're also not doing a whole lot of musical evolution. With that latter point in mind, let's address something very obvious. If you're a fan of Infant Annihilator, you're gonna like this album. Okay? It's their same old shtick. It's more refined in some aspects, it's definitely more aggressive, and the sound mix in particular is a lot cleaner, very sharp. It does remind me of a lot of more modern death metal and death grind, and I actually really appreciate that. That's the one area where this band really does show growth. It's actually even quite refreshing to hear an underground band opt for a much more professional, modern, crystal clear sound mix, highlighting all of the incredible performances across the fucking record, in particular the percussion. Jesus Christ, the drums are tight on this thing. The only other thing that the band really does to spice up their regular formula is the introduction of a few guest vocalists, but even they don't bring a whole lot of extra flavor to the table. They are nothing more than truffle salt and rosemary to dust over a pretty hearty plate of meat and potatoes. But hey, who would argue with extra seasoning, particularly when that extra seasoning comes in the form of the one and only Trevor Strand of the Black Dahlia Murder kicking fucking ass alongside this band on their third track, The Kingdom Sitteth Lonely Beneath Thine Hallowed Heavens. I actually had to read that off my laptop. That is a mouthful. Super tight, super menacing. I love the mid-paced, groovy death metal riffs in the beginning, and I love the massive, explosive, extreme metal catharsis that it all reaches to, with Trevor leading the way. Other guest vocalists like Storm Strope and Alex Terrible do a good job at introducing their own very subtle nuances to the whole thing without detracting from Infant Annihilator, which is not a bad thing because, as I've noted, they are crushing it as always. Opening track in particular had me headbanging right off the goddamn bat with its vicious onslaught of meaty riffs. There's a particular guitar lick at the 1 minute 50-second mark that I just found absolutely delicious. I also think this band does a really great job at interlacing their tech death influences into the sound. Take, for instance, Three Bastards, which definitely does have a lot of super technical movements and parts, but none of them collide, none of them turn this thing into a fucking wank fest like most tech death. It's genuinely tasteful, and even in its most show-offy moments is still inherently pretty cool and therefore pretty fun. Honestly, the only issue I have as far as the music is concerned is that the album is way too fucking long. There is no need whatsoever for this thing to be 57 minutes long. There's no fucking need for it at all. You could easily chop this fucking thing in fucking half and lose nothing. Ironically, there's no filler on this album. In fact, individually, all these songs are great, but unfortunately, when stacked all together, it just feels inherently pretty bloated and tiresome. And then there's the fact that, once again, I don't really care much for the shock factor of this record. There's so much stuff on here that is manufactured to shock your white suburban mom and do nothing else. Now, granted, extreme metal by design is inherently a pretty shocking genre. That's not up for debate at all. Just take a look at any number of records from Cattle Decapitation, Pig Destroyer, Napalm Death, fucking Carcass. But what separates Infant Annihilator from those bands is that those bands always have something to say. They're not trying to shock you for the sake of shocking you. They have something to say about politics, about the environment, about the state of the world. Whereas Infant Annihilator is just wanting to shock you. They want to provoke you. They want to edge you on. Why else release an album on 9/11 of all fucking days? In the end, I'm going to give this thing a 3 out of 5. I think that the enthusiasm, the energy, and the fantastic musicianship saves this record, but it is ultimately nonetheless a pretty bloated, pretty repetitive record that relies way too much on shock factor that doesn't work anymore, shock factor that I don't give a fuck about anymore. Probably wouldn't change your mind if you were a diehard Infant Annihilator fan, but at this point, if you haven't been a fan, there's no reason to start checking them out now. Perhaps if you've been vying for the more simplistic days of Cattle Decapitation, but you still enjoy the technical nuances in modern Cattle Decapitation, no harm in checking this thing out. And hey, maybe y'all don't give a fuck about the shock factor, and if that's the case, more power to you. Like I said, there's still plenty of solid death metal jams on here. But once again, even from that perspective, it's still too bloated for my personal liking. If Infant Annihilator really wants me to check out their 4th album, then they're going to have to make some serious changes real quick. 3 out of 5, I can't tell if it's a particularly enthusiastic or unenthusiastic 3 out of 5, but a 3 out of 5 nonetheless. If you're looking for a good collection of tight, competent, ultra fucking heavy death metal, nothing wrong with this whatsoever. Just don't expect anything near the level of what Infant Annihilator clearly think that they're on. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.